Once upon a time, in a quiet little town, surrounded by rolling hills and endless green fields, there lived a young man named Daniel. He was like many others in the village, waking up every morning to the sound of roosters, working hard in the fields, and returning home with weary hands and a tired heart. But unlike most, Daniel carried a heavy burden in his mind. He often thought of himself as unlucky, doomed to failure, and trapped in a cycle of bad fortune. Every time he faced a problem, he whispered to himself, "Of course, this had to happen to me. Nothing ever works out." His words became his belief, and his belief began to shape his life in ways he couldn't see. One morning, as Daniel sat by the river with his head in his hands, an old man approached him. This old man was known in the village as Elijah, someone whose eyes always carried a calm glow, as if he saw something beyond the ordinary struggles of life. Elijah asked Daniel why he looked so broken. Daniel sighed and poured out his worries, the harvest that failed, the money that was never enough, the feeling that his future would always be dark. Elijah listened patiently, then said with a soft voice, "Do you know the power of a single thought? A single seed in your mind can grow into a tree that shades your entire life. If the seed is poisonous, it will darken everything. But if the seed is good, it will bear fruit and give you strength." Daniel frowned. He didn't believe that thoughts could change the reality of empty fields or empty pockets. Elijah smiled and leaned closer. "Let me tell you a story," he said. "Long ago, there was a traveler who entered a desert with nothing but fear in his heart. He thought, 'I will die here. There is no water. There is no hope.' And as he walked, every shadow looked like a threat, every sound felt like a warning, and his steps grew heavier. He collapsed before he could reach the oasis that was only a few miles away. But another traveler entered the same desert with hope. He told himself, 'I will find water, I will survive.' He felt the sun as a guide, the winds as whispers leading him forward. His feet carried him further until he finally found the oasis and lived. The desert was the same. The difference was the thought." Daniel listened, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a spark inside his chest. Still, doubt lingered. He asked, "So, are you saying all my problems will disappear just by thinking differently?" Elijah shook his head. "No, my boy. Your problems are real, and they will still be there. But when your mind changes, you face them with new strength. Positive thoughts are not magic. They are fuel. They turn fear into courage, despair into patience, and weakness into persistence. And persistence in time changes everything." That night, Daniel lay awake on his straw bed, replaying Elijah's words. He decided to try something he had never done before. When he woke the next morning, instead of sighing about the hard day ahead, he whispered to himself, "Today will be a good day. Something good will come." The fields looked the same, the sun burned the same, but his heart felt lighter. When his tools broke, instead of cursing, he thought, "I'll fix this and keep moving." When clouds threatened rain, he told himself, "Rain will bring life." Slowly, something began to shift. His steps grew steadier, his back stood straighter, and neighbors noticed his change. Weeks passed, and Daniel's small field started to grow healthier, not because the weather suddenly became perfect, but because he worked with new energy. He tried new methods, asked for advice, and saw opportunities where before he saw only problems. One evening, he returned home with baskets of fresh vegetables, more than he had ever harvested. He remembered Elijah's words and smiled. The power was not in luck, but in the seed of a thought planted in his mind. But life, as always, tested him again. A storm came one night, strong enough to break trees and flood parts of the village. Many of Daniel's crops were destroyed, and the old Daniel, the one who believed only in bad fortune, began to whisper in his head again. "See? It was only a matter of time. You were foolish to believe things could change. Daniel almost gave in, but then he remembered the traveler in the desert. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath and said, "This is not the end. I can start again." The next morning, instead of drowning in despair, he worked twice as hard, and soon the land responded. Slowly, new growth appeared, stronger than before. Word of Daniel's transformation spread through the village. People who once pitied him now came to ask how he managed to stay hopeful, even in loss. He told them the same story Elijah once told him. The desert does not change, but our thoughts change how we walk through it. Villagers began to test it themselves. A mother who often cried over her poverty began to say each morning, "I have my children and that is wealth." A carpenter who once cursed every broken tool began to say, "Every problem teaches me to become better." Slowly, the village began to shine with new energy. But Daniel's greatest test came when his younger brother Michael fell ill. The illness drained the boy's strength, and doctors shook their heads. The old Daniel would have surrendered to despair, but the new Daniel sat by his brother's side and whispered every day, "You will be strong again. You will see the sunrise with me." Days were heavy, nights were longer, but hope remained alive in that small room. And one morning, Michael opened his eyes with a weak smile and said, "I feel better." Tears rolled down Daniel's face, not just for his brother's survival, but for the proof that positive thought gave strength when medicine alone seemed powerless. Years later, Daniel himself became known as the wise man of the village. Children gathered around him as he sat under the old banyan tree, the same way Elijah once sat with him. And every time someone came with a heavy heart, Daniel would share his story. He would say, "A single thought is like a single spark. Feed it, and it becomes a flame. Let it die, and you live in the dark. Choose carefully which thought you carry, because it will shape the world you see." His words lived on, not because they were grand or complex, but because they were true, lived, and felt. And so the story of Daniel reminds us even today, life will not always be gentle. Storms will come, problems will knock at your door, and fear will whisper in your ear. But when you choose to plant a seed of hope in your mind, you give yourself the strength to rise again. Positive thinking will not erase hardship, but it will change how you face it. And when you face it with courage, doors open and paths appear. Think about your own life for a moment. How many times have you allowed negative thoughts to control you, to whisper that you're not enough, that your future is doomed, that you cannot change? What if you planted a different seed today? What if tomorrow morning you told yourself, "Today will be a good day"? What if you believed that even in the middle of struggle, there is something to learn, something to build, something to love? Wouldn't your steps be lighter, your heart calmer, your courage stronger? The power of a positive thought is not just a story for Daniel or Elijah or the villagers. It is a story for you right now, in this very moment. You have a choice every morning, to let your fears lead you or to let your hope guide you. And if you think this is small, remember that a mountain is made of small stones and a river is made of small drops. Every great change begins with one simple decision in the mind. So here is the question for you. What thought will you choose to plant today? Will you carry the seed of fear, or will you carry the seed of strength? Will you allow your heart to sink, or will you let it rise with hope? Your life is waiting for your answer. If this story touched your heart, I want to invite you to do 3 simple things. First, share your own experience in the comments. Tell us about a moment when changing your thinking changed your life, even in a small way. Second, if you felt the power of this story, make sure you subscribe, because every story we share here is created to remind you that you are not alone and that you always have a choice. And third, give this video a like, because every click helps spread these stories to more people who may need them right now. Remember, the power of a positive thought is not just a lesson, it is a way of living. Carry it with you, test it, and see how your world begins to transform. Problems will still come, storms will still rise, but with a hopeful heart, you will never walk through the desert alone.